Welcome! This video is intended to oversimplify the World War II in a very simple and easy to understand manner. We will discuss the big picture in distinct chunks since the emergence of dictators to the battles of significant magnitude. Let's jump in. Benito Mussolini began his life as a young man who was evading military service in Italy by relocating to Switzerland. He was an avid socialist, an activist working with trade unions and writing about the dethronement of kings and rulers. Problems with the Swiss saw him come back to Italy, where he eventually served his military service. Subsequently, Mussolini was renowned due to his anti-war speeches. However, at the start of World War I, he changed his thoughts and concluded that the war would create a socialist revolution. His new opinions cost him membership of the Socialist Party. He then founded his own movement, the fascism, that was based on Italy unity, based on national pride rather than fighting against classes. Mussolini vowed to regain the glory of Italy, such as the Roman Empire. His fascist ideas got popularity when Italy was struggling in the post-World War I period. He pushed the king into appointing him as prime minister in 1922 and established dictatorship. Germany was the worst hit when it lost World War I, as was provided in the Treaty of Versailles that had severe repercussions on this nation. This treaty obliged Germany to surrender approximately 13% of its land, including those areas that had huge natural resources and industrial capacity, which left its economy very weak. Also, Germany had to significantly decrease its military strength, with its army limited to only 100,000 men, and air force, tanks, submarines were forbidden. The treaty also made Germany solely responsible of the war under the article of the Treaty 231, the War Guilt Clause. The treaty held Germany under a huge liability of giving colossal reparations in terms of billions of dollars. These reparations, coupled with the loss of territories and military handicapping, had led to an economic devastation, hyperinflation, and internal dissatisfaction among the German population, and it led to resentment and the feeling that the people were being humiliated by other countries. Germans generally viewed the treaty as a disgraceful dictate of the victors that was not negotiated fairly and made the country bitter in general. Adolf Hitler was a veteran of World War I and exploited this resentment and humiliation, which had a root in nationalism. Despite his first effort to control power in 1923, when he unsuccessfully tried to take over power by the notorious Beer Hall Putsch, which landed him in prison, the ideas of Hitler were becoming more popular in the 1920s and early 1930s. He capitalized on the anger of the German people with the Versailles Treaty by promising to give Germany back its lost glory, re-establish the army, and reverse the humiliating formulations that had been fixed. By 1933, Hitler had been made the Chancellor of Germany, and in the near future, he established control and made himself a dictator. During his rule, Germany started openly flouting the provisions of the treaty, rearming and having an agenda of fascism. The coming to power of Hitler was therefore a direct result of the political and economic insecurity caused by the punitive nature of the Treaty of Versailles, which led to the further conflict in Europe. The early 20th century was characterized by Germany, Italy, and Japan attempting to increase their power and influence in the world. One such case is Japan, that was under pressure to open the ports to foreign trade, and accordingly did so in the mid-19th century, despite Japan having been isolated long before that time. Japan was starting to realize that its fast industrialization was being crippled by insufficient natural resources, including oil, coal, and iron, as they started to modernize. To eliminate this weakness, Japan resorted to expansion of the empire and aimed to acquire some territories that would provide these vital resources. Its military and political intervention in East Asia, especially the invasion of China, was an effort to build its economic self-sufficiency and dominance within the region. At the same time, an aggressive course of rearmament was followed by the then ruling Germany led by Adolf Hitler, outright defying the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles, which had been laid on its military forces after the World War I. In the tensions between them and the Western powers, which were in dire need of not engaging in a possible large-scale conflict, they first pursued the policy of appeasement, according to which Hitler was permitted to make small territorial concessions in an attempt to preserve peace. But these concessions only tempted him. Germany annexed Austria in 1938, and then swiftly occupied sections of Czechoslovakia in 1938, with hardly much opposition by the Allies. And this was a good illustration of the ineffectiveness of appeasement in holding back the Nazi interests. Simultaneously, Italy had its own imperial ambitions, including North African and Mediterranean states, as the means of restoring the so-called New Roman Empire, as envisioned by its leader Mussolini. In Asia and Europe, Japan and Germany were steadily increasing their areas of influence through aggression. The three countries were identified with a common aim and interest, and thus they established an alliance with signing of a tripartite pact in 1940 between Germany, Italy, and Japan. This treaty committed them to assist each other in case they were assaulted by one of the world powers, and in effect, entailed the two countries as the Axis powers and predetermined the start of World War II. Adolf Hitler had long been targeting Poland, whose land he considered as critical in the expansion of Germans and his larger European ambitions. But he dreaded the nightmare of having to wage war on two fronts, one against France and Britain in the Western Front, and the other against the Soviet Union in the Eastern Front. To prevent this, he had tried to enter into a backdoor deal with the Soviet Union leader Joseph Stalin. Depending on the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the two totalitarian regimes secretly divided Poland between themselves when Poland was invaded. This agreement provided Hitler with the faith that he could attack Poland without fears of Soviet retaliation, which provided him a temporary reprieve that Germany would be able to wage war against its Western enemies without Soviet intervention. The Second World War started on September 1st, 1939, when the Wehrmacht invaded Poland in a huge way. Combining both ground troops and crushing air attacks, the attack was sudden and brutal and was a combination known as Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Britain and France responded to this aggressive act without any provocation by fulfilling their defense commitments to Poland by declaring war on Germany only 2 days after. Though these proclamations were made, the initial months to come later on the Western Front were marked by very little military action, a phase that later came to be referred to as the phony war. It was a tense peace in which both parties were planning the bigger war which was imminent, whilst somehow the position of Poland was being determined by the German and the Soviet occupation. When its troops seized the French army in a sudden, unexpected attack through the thick forest of Ardennes, the world was shocked, as the French army had assumed that that forest was impassable by large-scale armored forces. It was by traversing this rugged land that the German army was able to entirely circumvent the heavily armed and notoriously known Maginot Line of the French fortifications. This tactic was a surprise attack and showed a new revolutionary type of warfare called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, and it was based on speed, coordination, and overwhelming the enemy. The unexpected progression sided the Allies and led to the surrounding and occupation of thousands of their men before they could seriously address themselves to a defense. In the turmoil of this massive German assault, the British Expeditionary Force, together with some French forces, was in a trap around the coastal city of Dunkirk. A huge convoy of naval and civilian ships rescued hundreds of thousands of soldiers across the English Channel in one of the greatest evacuation offensives ever witnessed, sparing the very heart of the British Army destruction. With this incredible escape, France did not long resist the invasion of the Germans, as it capitulated just after a few weeks of struggle. Britain was left to fight against the Nazi Germany on its own, and it appeared that it was an unavoidable and monumental challenge. Following the conquest of most of Western Europe, Adolf Hitler shifted his focus to Britain and was planning to invade the country with a full-throttle invasion over the English Channel. Nevertheless, Germany ground troops did not even have time to think of landing when Hitler and his military planners realized that the mastery of skies was a prerequisite. The German Navy and Army could not stand against British defenses without having air superiority. So, a ruthless air war commenced, wherein the German Luftwaffe was not only attacking the British airfields and radar stations, but at one point, attacking large cities, as this would serve to weaken both the Royal Air Force, the RAF, and the spirits of the British people. The RAF did not give in despite the presence of a huge and a well-equipped Luftwaffe. British airmen in the famous planes such as Spitfire and the Hurricane fought the enemy bombers and fighters in dogfights in skies of southern England. This boldness, ingenuity, and organization by use of a novel radar system enabled them to move and counterattack, even when outnumbered. It culminated in the summer and fall of 1940 in what was to be called the Battle of Britain. With perseverance, tactical genius, and national unity, Britain managed to protect its skies, causing massive casualties to the German Air Force. That victory made Hitler delay and ultimately forsake his plans to invade the country, and it was the first humiliation of the Nazi Germany, and also made it clear that the Allies could oppose its armed forces. The war had serious blows to the military campaigns in Italy when Italy joined the war with Germany. The idea by Benito Mussolini to establish a new Roman Empire in North Africa and the Mediterranean soon came to a halt. The Italian army was unprepared and equipped, thus not able to contend with the British in Egypt, and were consequently driven away. Their invasion into Greece too went wrongly when the Greeks launched a strong counterattack, leaving Germany to intervene and aid her ally. These were some of the setbacks that weakened the standing of Italy in the war, and highlighted the increasingly unbalanced state of the Axis powers. When Europe and North Africa were engaged in a fierce battle, something was taking place on the other side of the world that has transformed the scale of the war altogether. On December 1941, Japan attacked the United States naval base at the Pearl Harbor in Hawaii unexpectedly. The blow was crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet, and the American people were shocked by the strike. In reaction to this, the United States declared war on Japan, formally joining the war around the world and transforming the local conflicts in Asia and Europe into a fully global conflict. After the attack, Japan struck along the Pacific and Southeast Asia. Japanese forces conquered the territories very rapidly in order to gain access to such important resources as oil, rubber, and metals. In a few months, they occupied large regions such as the Philippines, Malaya, and some islands in the Pacific. The rapid growth of Japan appeared to be impossible to stop, at the initial stage extending its power to the Pacific Ocean and creating a strong empire which was going to be soon confronted by the willful resistance of the Allied army. During the summer of 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union in large scale in what was to be one of the greatest military operations ever witnessed in history. The German troops moved with immense speed on the expansive lands, and millions of Soviet soldiers were captured and vast tracts of land taken. Their Blitzkrieg techniques defeated most Soviet fortifications, and very soon they were a threat to Moscow. But later, as the campaign was stretched to the bitter Russian winter, the German army was unprepared to the bitter cold. Their gears failed, their supplies were declining, and soldiers had frostbite and fatigue. The previously invincible German march had started to drag because of nature and logistic breakdowns. The Soviet Union took this chance to reorganize and strengthen its position. New RIFs, most of them better armed and trained in winter warfare, were introduced by the East, It was a new determination and leadership that enabled the Soviets to conduct great counterattacks and drove the Germans out of the suburbs of Moscow. The wave of war started changing their course until one of the most cruel fights of the war, the Battle of Stalingrad. This fight turned out to be a beacon of Soviet opposition and strength. The Soviets were the victors after several months of intense fighting in the cities and massive loss of lives on both sides. The loss of German troops at Stalingrad was a turning point in the war, with a wave of cruel Soviet-gained control and a relentless move toward the west, causing the German army to be recapped inside the country. The Axis powers fought the Allied forces in a tough battle all over North Africa, which was one of the most important places to fight the war that challenged both the strategy, endurance, and logistics. Through reinforcement and better strategies, British forces came out strongly in a counter-offensive in the decisive Battle of El Alamein. It was the first victory in the Desert War, and it made the Italian forces to retreat and weaken the Axis control in the region. The victory not only raised the morale of the Allies, but it also opened the doors to an expanded offensive that would change the center of the war to Europe in the near future. After being successful in North Africa, the Allies were now focusing on Italy, but in an attempt to attack directly at the Axis powers in the European mainland, they invaded it through the south. The movement saw the fall of the fascist government of Benito Mussolini as he was ousted out of power, and this marked the fall of Italy as a loyal ally of the Axis forces. Although Italy was officially surrendered, the war in the country did not stop instantly. German troops rapidly conquered the northern sector of the country and transformed it into another battlefield, with the Allies battling their way north through inhospitable conditions and with strong opposition. This was a long struggle, and it enabled the ultimate emancipation of Western Europe. The turning point came in June 1944, and the great invasion by the Allies was D-Day, when the thousands of troops rushed through the beaches of the northern French region of Normandy. The landings were carefully coordinated and executed under immense pressure, and hence the start of the much-awaited liberation of Western Europe under the Nazi control. True resistance greeted the operation, resulting in several days of fierce fighting with heavy casualties, as the Allied troops struggled to penetrate fortified beaches, hedges, and towns. The strong will and bravery of the Allied forces eventually succeeded despite the intensive German attacks. Their victory in Normandy was the gateway to France, and during their progression, they moved at a high speed across the countryside. The momentum practice was still maintained in the following months. In late August 1944, the Allies occupied Paris, and the city was finally liberated after years of occupation to the cheers of the ecstatic populace. The Allied forces continued their advance eastwards through that, pushing away German forces through Belgium and into their own countries. This unstoppable offensive preconditioned the very last stages of the war in Europe, which meant that the defeat of Nazi Germany was no longer a question of when, but of how. The United States used the atomic bomb to put an end to World War II with dramatic effect in 1945 by attacks on Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombs caused an unmatched destruction, and Japan surrendered without terms, and the war in the Pacific officially came to an end. In the same year, earlier on, Germany had been defeated in Europe by the continuous assaults of the Soviet troops in the eastern side and the Allied troops in the west. The fall of Berlin was the last failure of the Nazi forces, and when it was clear that the defeat was a certainty, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, which marked the victory and the dramatics of the wearing out of his forces and the end of the war in Europe. World War I is the deadliest conflict in human history that has taken tens of millions of people and destroyed the vast territories of the world. The end of the fighting marked the onset of a new world order that now revolved around two superpowers, the United States and Soviet Union. They both came out of the war as superpowers that had opposite ideologies of capitalism and communism, which led to the escalating political tension, military competition, and nuclear competition. This contest of world power and global supremacy led to a lengthy phase of antagonism that was called the Cold War that characterized the international relations over the following decades. Insightful but straightforward deconstructing of World War II. Thank you. It is so much more detailed, though this will give you the general story in simple terms. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and be interested in history.